You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Melissa Cruz.
Thank you for tuning into Author Stories. We have a fantastic show for you today. Be sure to go to hankgarner.com where you can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platform. You can find links to it there at hankgarner.com. I'd like to tell you about some sponsors before we get started today. The Clockwork Detective, Constable of Aquiline, Book 1 by R.A. McCandless. Aubrey Hartman left the Imperial battlefields with a pocket full of medals, a fearsome reputation, and a clockwork leg. The Imperium diverts her trip home to investigate the murder of a young druid in a strange town. She is ordered to not only find the killer, but prevent a full-scale war with the dreaded Fae. Meanwhile, the arrival of a sinister secret policeman threatens to dig up Aubrey's own secrets, ones that could ruin her career. It soon becomes clear that Aubrey has powerful enemies with plans to stop her before she gets started. Determined to solve the mystery, Aubrey must survive centaurs, thugs, and a monster of pure destruction. You need to check out this exciting new series from R.A. McCandless, Steampunk Meets Urban Fantasy, and The Clockwork Detective. The Zombie Road Omnibus, The Roadkill Collection by David Simpson. Buckle up, it's gonna get bloody. Get the Zombie Road box set featuring the first 3 books in the award-winning Zombie Road series for over 1,100 pages of action-packed, suspense-filled, post-apocalyptic fiction. Includes Convoy of Carnage, Bloodbath on the Blacktop, Rage on the Rails. If you're looking for apocalyptic thrill ride filled with everyday people, heroes, villains, and a dog named Bob, then look no further. Full of thought-provoking ideas that cover uncharted territory in post-apocalyptic fiction, this series will keep you rooting for the good guys, despising the bad, and turning the pages until the very end. The Zombie Road Omnibus, The Roadkill Collection by David Simpson. Homefront, an Expeditionary Force audio drama special from Craig Allenson. A full cast performance of a thrilling new episode in the New York Times best-selling Expeditionary Force series. After the latest mission of the Starship Flying Dutchman, Earth is safe, not just for a year, but for hundreds of years. The ship's weary crew wonders what they will do with their lives in the peacetime, but the enemy has other plans, and there's danger on the home front. Starring Zachary Quinto, R.C. Bray, Kate Mulgrew, Robert Picardo, and everyone's favorite AI, Skippy the Magnificent, alongside a full cast. Includes plenty of pew 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 original sound composition and maybe some singing by R.C. Bray. Homefront, an Expeditionary Force audio drama special by Craig Allenson. Now stay tuned for the show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have Sherry LaPena on the show with me today. She has a fantastic new book called Someone We Know, and if you were one of the bajillion people that read The Couple Next Door, then you will be super excited for this new book, as I was, and really looking forward to chatting about it today. Welcome to the show, Sherry.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Sherry, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
My first memory, I don't remember my first memory, but I do remember when I was 9 years old thinking that that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer, and I specifically wanted to write books like the Nancy Drew books. I remember thinking that. That's what I wanted to do. That's back when I thought Carolyn Keene was one person, and I wanted to be Carolyn Keene, writing all the Nancy Drew books. But actually, there's a bunch of people writing under the name Carolyn Keene.
Right. Nancy Drew was such a gateway drug for a lot of readers and for writers, especially mystery and thriller writers. Do you remember what that experience was reading those books and how it changed the way you think about or thought about books?
Well, I remember the very first one I got. I was homesick from school, and my mother went to the grocery store, and she brought home The Clue of the Velvet Mask, or the Black Velvet Mask or something. And I just raced through that, and after that I read every Nancy Drew I could get my hands on. That might have been the first mystery I ever read in my life. I was probably about 7 or 8. But I loved it, absolutely loved it. And then, of course, I moved on to Agatha Christie and all the other mystery writers as I got a bit older. But I remember being so engrossed with Nancy Drew that me and my friends started a Nancy Drew club, and we would try to solve mysteries. And we had this one mystery in grade 2 where someone had their lawnmower stolen, and we were trying to figure it out. We never solved the crime.
Oh, that's amazing. That it sounds like I don't know if you remember in the early '80s or so, there was a series, Encyclopedia Brown, who is a neighborhood kid who would solve mysteries. And that's
yeah, I remember. I've seen Encyclopedia Brown when my kids were growing up, but I was too old by the '80s. So I moved on from kids' books. But yeah.
At what point did you start telling stories of your own?
Well, to be honest, I never really wrote until I was home with my first kid. So I made a couple of stabs at it, but I never really wrote anything. Never really sat down seriously and wrote anything until I was in my late 30s. And I decided just to sit down and write and see what came out. And I ended up writing 3 literary novels. That 2 of them were published in those early years before I started writing thrillers.
Before that experience, when you were home and decided to write, had you ever had dreams or thoughts of being a writer one day, or had it just not caught up with you yet?
Yeah, no, I always wanted to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do. That was the lifestyle I wanted. I just never had the confidence or the time or thought it was a realistic goal to pursue. And so I pursued other things. And then, people want to be writers. They really want to be writers. And it just kind of hangs over them their whole life until they actually become writers. And then they write and write and write for years before they actually get anything out. So I think people who want to be writers are very committed and write for years before they see a contract because they want to write. So that was sort of what I was like. It just took me longer than it should have to actually sit down and give it a go. I think I just didn't have the confidence, or I just thought it wasn't something I could do, or it wasn't, why spend the time if I wasn't going to be successful at it, kind of thing.
That's so interesting because I think that's what a lot of people suffer from, is just the lack of the believing that it can be done. And it's so weird because when you sit down to do it, it's a pretty easy thing to get over, but that's such a big hurdle in the beginning.
It really is, because people look at you and they think, "Oh, why do you think you can be a writer?" You know what I mean? It's sort of so what I did, and what I recommend if you have that problem of people looking at you and thinking, "What makes you think you can be a writer?" I just wrote in secret. I just didn't tell anybody. I mean, my husband knew, but I didn't go around telling people, "Oh, I'm going to be a writer," and create all these expectations. I just quietly worked away for years until I had a book ready to show someone. And I think that's maybe what a lot of writers do, or that's what a lot of writers maybe should do. No one has to read your early work, because it takes a long time to learn how to write well. And if you feel like you have to tell people you're writing a novel right off the bat, then that's quite crushing. I mean, it gets your internal censor working overtime, and then then you get writer's block because you think, "Oh, it's not good enough." So my thing is, if you write in secret and you write for yourself to see what comes out, and give yourself the permission to do that for many years and develop a voice and develop the craft, then it's quite doable. Just don't tell anybody.
Well, it's such a weird thing. Science fiction and fantasy writer Brandon Sanderson was on the show one time, and he said, if someone goes to the gym and plays basketball, every Monday night, No one comes up to that person and says, when are you going to make it to the NBA? No one puts that. Yeah, but for writers, if you tell them you're writing something, then all of a sudden these expectations are on it, and it has to become something instead of just letting people do what they love for the sake of them loving it.
I know. I don't know what it is about writing, but it's the worst for that. People say, oh, how's the book coming? And do you have a publisher yet? And how much money have you made? And blah, blah, blah. But you're right. They don't do that with other hobbies.
Right.
So that's why I was very aware of that. So I was very close to my chest about what I was doing. And then even when I'd had books published and I'd had good responses to my books in Canada, when I sat down to write a thriller, I didn't tell anybody that I was making that change in genre, and I didn't even tell my husband till the book was pretty much finished. So I had complete free reign. I didn't tell my agent. I didn't, tell anybody. I just wanted, because I didn't think I could do it. I thought a thriller is going to take plotting, and I don't know how to plot, so I probably can't do it. But I really want to try, and I'm going to give it a shot. And so that's what I did. And 6 months later, I'd written The Couple Next Door. So that's what freedom allows you to do. If you don't have that freedom from other people's expectations and criticisms, then it's very hard to write what you want to write. You're writing for everybody else. So I think, you're right. I mean, I don't know why people think if you're writing you should have a blockbuster right away.
I don't either.
Silly.
It is very silly.
Yeah.
You said that your first books were literary fiction, and we know you now as a thriller writer. I hate the distinctions between types of fiction. It can be very confusing and muddy. It's really strange the way we categorize things. But how would you categorize the difference in those first works and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think the whole label thing is really more of a marketing concern. I think it's hard to market books without knowing what to call them and what section to put them in. So I think that's why we get the labels of literary versus, thrillers and so on. I think there's a lot of really good thrillers that, become into the realm of very well-written literary books, and I think there's some literary books that are poorly written. I think the distinction really is there's genre books, which are sort of, they fall within certain genres, like thrillers, and then there's non-genre books or general fiction, which everybody calls literary, regardless of how well written they are, which is what I find frustrating. Don't you find that? I mean, you say it's literary. If it doesn't fall within one of the genres, then you say it's literary or general fiction. But there's a lot of literary or general fiction that's very poorly written compared to some really excellent genre fiction. So, and some of them completely blend borders. Like I always like to mention, we need to talk about Kevin, which is considered a literary book, but it's also an incredible crime thriller. It sort of covers both, So I think there's a lot of really good, really well-written crime fiction out there, but it falls within the crime genre. And then there's some really poorly written general literary fiction. So my literary fiction was funny. So I wrote literary comedies, which is a very different voice from suspense. And the only thing I was thinking about this, because Linwood Barclay, who's a fellow Canadian, also wrote comedy before he started writing thrillers. And, all I can think of is I think if you can write comedy, then your sense of timing is really good. And I think with writing suspense, you have to have an innate sense of good timing. And I think that's what is common to them. Good comedy, you've got a really good ear for timing. Same with suspense.
And with suspense and that general feeling of doom and impending danger is a very close cousin to comedy in a lot of ways, because what do we do a lot of times when we feel insecure? We crack jokes about it. We go to dark humor. I think there's a lot related in those two things.
I think, and even my comedies were, sort of dark, dark comedies for sure. And I love Russian literature, Russian fiction, because it's got that sort of, it's so dark and it's so funny at the same time. And that's human nature. It's human nature at its extreme. Like when you're feeling extreme emotion, you're, very dark, very suspenseful. But also, as you say, you laugh at it to bear it, to make it manageable. So I like to write stuff that pushes the envelope in how you feel, like it's very emotional fiction, as opposed to dull, or as opposed to non-emotional fiction. So it's psychological suspense.
But before you started writing, as most of us do, that either want to be writers or don't yet know that we are going to pursue that, we live some life along the way and have a career and family and all that sort of stuff. What career path did you choose before writing?
Well, when I was first out of university, I went to law school, and I became a lawyer, and I lasted for about 2 years, and then I just had enough. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, I'm not suited to law. I found it was either very stressful or very boring, or sometimes both at once, which, you think that isn't possible, but it is possible to be both stressed and bored at the same time, which is it's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
So I decided to switch careers and become an English teacher. So I went back to school and went to teacher's college. And then I did that for a bit. And then when I had my first child, I stayed home and I started writing then. That's when I really, I thought, I've got the opportunity now. I'm going to take advantage of it. Nobody has to know. I'll just work away and see what happens. And, it all worked out in the end.
So far, so good, huh?
So far, so good. But I'm 20 years in now. I started writing, when my first kid was born, and he's 20 now. So I've been writing consistently, in a very disciplined way for 20 years. So, it's not overnight.
Yeah, I think you're over the hump by now. I think you're going to make it.
Yeah. I'm just the point I'm making for writers is it's not fast for anybody. I don't personally know anyone who wrote one book like out of the blue and hadn't done years of practice writing or stuff that's in a drawer or, I mean, it's
Exactly.
the rare person who can bang one off and say, oh, I've never written a line, and then they write it. I mean, maybe it happens. It certainly didn't happen for me. I had to learn how to do it, and I think most people are like that.
Well, it's super rare. Out of the 700 or so shows that we've done, that is, one maybe. It has been a guest who's, and I'm trying to pull out. But yeah, it's just not. That's not the reality. Most people are overnight successes, 10 years in the making at least.
Yeah. They look like they're an overnight success, but
Exactly.
no one sees the decades of work that go into it. Yeah. And that's why people go up to you at the gym and say, well, why isn't your book out yet? They don't know that the learning curve is so long, and they don't understand how hard it is to get published these days, too.
Well, I love to explore the cross sections of artistic expressions, but not only that, but life experience. Do you feel like your time as an attorney, or maybe in law school, and your time as a teacher, have affected your writing? Maybe tools or things that you picked up along the way that help? Do you feel like that experience you had before is a benefit to you in what you're doing now?
Not specifically, no. I would say, if I'd been a criminal lawyer, then yeah, it might have been helpful to have material and to understand how the system works, but I never did any criminal law. And being a teacher, I mean, I read, literary books that you teach in school, but I would have read those anyway, kind of thing. No, I think what's important is life experience in general, and just having a lot. I think what happened to me was when I was young and wanted to be a writer, I really didn't have anything to say, or I didn't feel that I had anything to say, or enough life experience or anything to talk about. I couldn't come up with any ideas. When you get older and more confident, you see everything as an idea, and you have more confidence to explore it. So I think as long as you're living a life and you're opening your mind to everything you see around you, then that's all fodder for your writing life. And of course, if you're a pirate or a police homicide detective, that's all great, but most of us aren't. But I do think that, I feel kind of, there's a lot of people going through these creative writing programs for their undergrad and university now, and I'm not a fan of those. I don't want to, I don't want to say anything bad about them, but I worry that, coming out with a creative writing degree, I worry that they come out all sounding the same. So I think life experience and, sometimes you can workshop something to death and get 15 opinions on it, and what you end up with is no voice of your own. So I think what's more important is writing your own voice and maybe having one or two people you trust to look at it rather than 12 people all with different points of view on it, and then everything comes out sounding the same,
Writing by committee is a horrible thing.
I think so. I think it is, and I worry that some of these creative writing programs, that's what they do. They workshop things to death, and everything comes out sounding like sort of the same voice. But, I shouldn't say that because lots of people do those programs. I certainly didn't do those programs. Oh, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that is in any way necessary. Lots of really great writers never went to school to be a writer. It's something that you work on your own and through life experience. And, anyone who's out there who wants to be a writer and thinks, I can't afford to go to university to get a creative writing degree, don't worry. You're better off working 2 jobs in New York City and writing every night, I think, if you want to develop a voice of your own.
And watching and listening to people all along the way.
Absolutely. Ears open, eyes open. And being really like genuinely interested in other people and what makes them tick and so on.
Your first thriller novel was The Couple Next Door, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have any idea when you were writing that book that it was going to be such a breakout success? And what was the initial inspiration for that book?
Well, I had no idea it was going to be an initial success because I think I told you I wrote that one in secret because I wasn't sure I could pull it off at all, not being a plodding ahead kind of person. So I wrote that one for fun and as an experiment. And when it was done, I thought, this kind of hangs together, kind of works. And I liked it, but I didn't think it was going to be a breakout success. What I did do is I sent it to an agent that is quite a famous thriller agent in Canada because I wanted a new agent. I didn't want to use the agent that I used for my literary books because they didn't know anything about thrillers. And, she loved it, and within weeks it was preempted in New York, and it was sold all over the place, and it was huge. And from there it just went up and up and up, and it's still selling strongly after 3 years. So that book, no, I had no idea that one would be a breakout book. I had no idea it would even be published. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get an agent for it. But, writers, we never think things are going to go well. So I just feel I was very fortunate with events and how everything worked out. I got a fantastic publisher, and things have worked out for me. And, I didn't see it coming at all. Like if you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here talking to you about all this, I would have thought, no way. Because my literary books sold like a couple thousand copies. They didn't set the world on fire. And in terms of the idea, how I got the idea for The Couple Next Door, it just popped into my head one day. That's all. I live in one of these semi-detached houses we have in Toronto where you can hear people on the other side. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if someone went next door with the monitor and left the baby behind and what might happen? And then, boom, I thought, ooh, that's a great idea. Because I wanted to call on all that, like, dread of the parental guilt, right? So, and I think that's what really drove that book was the feeling of parental angst that everyone's suffering. And then with this new book, Someone We Know, I'm sort of getting it at the other end with the late teenage years, getting at the parental angst about what's the right way to handle this when a kid goes off the rails. So it's different, the different ends of parenting, the newborn, vigilance of the newborn versus how much vigilance do you give the older teenager. And, parents are always worried. End of story.
Well, that's and that's the great thing about your books is it does play off of this this angst that we all are carrying around. Are we doing the right thing? Each day's decisions. Yeah. How are these going to play out? For 50 years down the road, and am I ruining this kid? And
I know
all
none
the
of us are sure of anything anymore.
Right, right. And I think
back like our grandparents must have been so much more sure that they were doing everything right.
Either that or
I don't know anybody who thinks they're doing it right.
Or they hid their neurosis really well.
I think so.
Yeah. Why do you think I would think most of your readers are perfectly well-adjusted people that are doing the very best job they can with their families and their communities. Why do you think we love stories of kind of the worst-case scenario happening?
I don't know. I've thought about this a lot because I get asked this a lot, and certainly these kinds of books are having a moment. I was thinking, maybe it's that someone asked me the other day, said, is it that we're all trying to live the suburban dream? And I said, I don't think the suburban dream, I think, is gone, that idea of the white picket fence and everybody having their happy little family in there. It's sort of with the rise of feminism, we lost that suburban dream. But what we have now is this sort of hyper-pressured, competitive world where everyone's trying to look like they've got it all. And I blame social media for that, where everyone's trying to look like they're doing everything, they're doing it all really well, and everybody loves them, and they look great doing it, and, everything's perfect. So it's hyper pressured and hyper competitive, and I think maybe people like to read a book where they look behind the scenes and they think, oh, they might look like they've got it all together, but they're struggling as much as I am, I don't know.
It's kind of like horror that kind of allows us to see the worst case scenario, but from the comfort of our reading chair, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. We like to experience it, but not really experience it.
But not really experience it, right. The new book, Someone We Know, like you said, this takes a little different turn in that we're seeing the other end of parenting. Tell me about Raleigh and where this character comes from.
Well, he comes from an idea from something I read on the internet, which is I read a story about a teenage boy who his parents cut off his internet at home. And so in the middle of the night, he broke into his neighbors to borrow their Wi-Fi so that he could stay on his computer, which I thought was, I giggled too. I thought, oh, isn't that just so typical of a teenager? And then I started thinking, because they don't look too far ahead. They just look at, how can I get Wi-Fi? I'll go next door. And then I thought about, oh, well, what if the kid was pretty good with computers and he also kind of just looked inside the computer and saw something he shouldn't have seen? And then I thought, how would the mother react if she found out? And I knew that if it happened to me, I would be absolutely mortified, and I would want to march the kid over and apologize. But then, of course, if you do that, he's open to criminal charges. So then I got the idea of, oh, well, she could write anonymous apology letters to sort of assuage her guilt and apologize without risking the kid. Which is the best.
I love that part of the story.
Further complicated because the husband thinks it's a terrible idea, so of course she can't tell him that she's going to do it, so she does it in secret, and then it all blows up in her face, and then she has to tell him, and yeah, things just get more and more tangled and messed up from there. So that's the way I like it. I like things to get really tangled and messed up.
Well, it really plays against that dark humor thing that is a running thread through your stories. This kind of confluence of crazy things happening. And excuse me, I don't know what that noise was.
It's a tractor. Sounds like a tractor.
Just out of nowhere. But yeah, that as you have famously said before, that you don't always know how the story's going to end. And so when you've created this cast of characters and you've put them in a series of events, are you just along for the ride to see where they go? Like, how do you start chasing down these plot threads?
I just, I do it one day at a time, basically. I just write a scene, and then usually that scene will have a kernel in it that will lead to the next scene, and then that will have a little twist or something that will lead me to the next scene. What I like to do is, because I work in multiple points of view, I can get inside the heads of lots of different characters. So if I'm kind of stuck on character A, I'll think, okay, let me go see how character B is doing, or I'll move to character B because character A has just revealed something, and then I got to see how character B feels about that. So I always have something to keep me going, and that's how I just kind of proceed through the whole book. And I find if I just do it incrementally like that, if I just write every day, then I get a natural momentum going. I find if I take a couple weeks off, like I have recently, to travel and promote. Then I come back and there's just nothing there, and then I have to go back and reread it, get back in the mood, and then it starts to take over again. But if I take a couple weeks off, I have nothing. I have to I have to start all over.
Do you have a particular writing ritual? Do you need to be in a certain space and at a certain time, or do you just grab time whenever you can?
I wouldn't say it's a ritual. I work best in the morning, and I work best at my own desk, so I prefer to be at my own desk in the mornings if I can. If I don't work in coffee shops, I find there's too much distraction. I don't work well on the road, so I don't really bother trying to write when I'm on the road. I'm highly distractible, so I'm better off in a quiet environment where no one's bugging me. So for that reason, I tend to write, in my own house in the mornings when I'm fresh. I'm not someone who can write in a coffee shop.
As you're writing, do you have a process for taking notes and tracking characters and things like that, or does it all just stay in your head as you go?
It stays in my head, although in the last couple of books, I've started writing a new file. Like I have a file, it's my draft, excuse me, and then I have a file on notes. And then if I have any ideas, and I put a date of the day's date, and if I have any ideas for what might happen the next day, I'll put them in there. So actually, I've got it dated. This is the first time I've had this for this fifth book, where I could actually go back. I'm looking forward to this. I'll actually be able to go back and look at the date when I started, which was May 16th, and look at all my thoughts as maybe this could happen tomorrow, and maybe this could happen, and maybe this could happen, and see which ones I follow and which ones I don't, and how I get there, because I think that's going to be fun. I haven't done that before. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
How was after having several thrillers out now, has your writing process changed? Your the ideas about the way that you approach plot and characters, have those evolved along the way?
No, I'm still kind of doing it by the seat of my pants the way I did The Couple Next Door. I think the difference is I have more confidence in the process that it's going to actually come together for me. And I'm better now at working with editors in terms of rewriting, in terms of getting my head around the revising and so on that goes into rewriting a thriller. So I'm just more, I'm just more experienced. The process is the same, but I'm more comfortable with the book a year because I've been through it now a few times. So I'm not worried that I'm not going to make a deadline like I was in book 2, or I've gotten used to the travel and the promotion, so that's not as distracting as it used to be, although it's still quite distracting. So I guess I would just say nothing's really changed, except that because I'm more experienced, I'm not as stressed as I was, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, and that's such an
important...
important...
And that's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice not to be so stressed, yeah.
Well, it's important for your creative process for it to be a continuing thing. You need to be at peace with what you're doing, for sure.
Yeah, I think after Couple came out, it was very stressful for me because I had that, for the second book, people talk about the difficult second book, and it was hard for me to get that one written because I had a deadline, I had a lot of attention, and I had a lot of promotion to do that was very distracting, a lot of travel, and it was hard to focus on the book and get it done on time. So I think once I got through that one, that was tough, and then now I'm sort of more in the groove kind of thing.
Well, Sherry, Someone We Know is one of my favorite books of the year so far. I love it.
Oh, good.
It had me alternately smiling and terrified and losing sleep at night and a little neurotic, so I think that's all signs of a fantastic book. If people are just learning about you and want to dig into your back catalog and find out all kinds of stuff about you, is there a place they can connect with you online?
Yeah, so they can go to my website at www.sherrylepena.com. So Sherry is Shari, Lepena is Lapena. And I have an author website, so if you want to interact with me, you can go on there, and I answer everybody that emails me a message on my website. So those are the best two ways to learn about me and connect with me. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and just my handle is my name, basically, for those two as well. I'm trying to figure out Instagram. I'm not good at it. But I love the way people go on Instagram and put pictures of the book on, and I'm like, whoo, that's so cool.
Oh, yeah. Instagram's where all the good vibes are. So
Instagram is where the fans are. I have thousands of fans on Instagram, and every day they say, well, they send me stuff. I love your book, and they send pictures of it in, interesting surroundings, by the pool or whatever. It's just so fun. It's really fun. Yeah, I'm just not very good at posting to it and following. Like, I don't know how to retag or any of that stuff yet. I'm really too old for all this technology, and all the different platforms are confusing. And the worst thing is when they change it. Like, I can't do Goodreads anymore because they've changed it. I don't know how to get on, and I don't know how to move from one platform to another platform, like how to get something from one to the other. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
But I do have an author Facebook page, and I have figured out most of that.
Well, we'll put links to all of that in the show notes of this episode.
Oh, good.
Sherry, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. I've had a blast, and I'm a big fan,
too.
So thank you for taking time to come on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe at hankgarner.com or on your favorite podcasting app. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
Mather steepled his hands. You asked to join us once? Hedwig leaned forward, eagerly. The appointed. Does that appeal? Yes. Do you even know what we do? My grandmother used to say that you control the world. That's not far off. But why? To what end? I don't know. Power? Pour me a bourbon. Mather reached into his briefcase and produced a file folder. I want to tell you one story. Have you ever heard of Centralia, Pennsylvania? No. He produced a photo for Hedwig's inspection. Spring of 1962. A pretty little town, wasn't it? Whitewash and ticky-tacky, pastel housewives and perfect lawns. A mining community, mostly. Coal. He turned over a second photo. A lovely young woman. There was a single witch in Centralia named Anna Lively. Anna had a green thumb. She could make her garden grow, whisper to a flower, and send it shooting from the ground like that. Just lovely. But she was discovered. That spring, a boy named Bobby Avery received a Bell & Howell Zoomatic movie camera for his 11th birthday. Bobby amused himself by filming his neighbors, sometimes without their knowledge, through windows and over garden fences. 12 seconds of film. Just a girl and her garden patch and one swiftly blooming rose. It killed the town. Bobby showed it to his friends. Children believe readily. Bobby was the first to die. Parents looked into it, watched the film themselves, and they began to die. Anna disappeared. Perhaps they attacked her. Perhaps she escaped. But even in her absence, knowledge of a true witch was running wild through the population, as if Anna had beckoned it herself to grow verdant and spread. The great curse had killed 64 Centralians by the 1st of June. The footage was offered to a national news organization. That was the precipice. It might have been shown in prime time, between Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons. We came very close to another worldwide calamity, but we were fortunate. One of our own was in place at the network. He alerted his superiors, and they ended the situation. Do you know how? I'm afraid to ask. Mather laid down another photo. This is Centralia today. It was an aerial view of a forest. Endless trees and underbrush cut through by lanes of pavement. Just a maze of cracking asphalt, like the foundations of Sodom, ripped bare by the wrath of God. Only a cemetery remained, on a hill overlooking the former town. A white marble angel stood among the graves, grieving for the ruins below, like Lot's wife, turned to salt. You destroyed the whole town? Not I. This was well before my time. But, yes. Just as you'd cauterize a wound to stop a patient from bleeding to death. We blamed it on an uncontrollable mine fire deep below the earth. We actually set the coal burning in case someone investigated. It burns today. Touch any of those streets and you'll find them hot, the asphalt melting as if the town sat just above perdition. It's not something we're proud of, but it was necessary to save the world. Centralia, Pennsylvania, and everyone who'd seen that film had to be sacrificed. Mather collected the photos. So, that is why the appointed exist, and that is what we do. Still want to join?